Hey.
Hello. Where am I? Oh, here I am.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hey.
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. Hey Hans, how you feeling? Hopefully a little bit better.
Typing will work then. Oh yeah, so Steph was not feeling well and now virtually passed it to Hans, right? Is that the level of, I'm not sure if it's COVID, but is that like the level of transmissibility of this?
Yeah, it's really serious.
Oh, when viruses can be passed by Zoom, we're all pretty much in trouble. It's over.
Yeah. And then looks like just Cole, right? And is Cole coming today?
Haven't heard anything to the contrary. Okay.
Yep.
Here we go.
And Hans, is COVID like the he who shall not be named, like Voldemort kind of? Is that why right now with the, yeah, bad word. Okay.
I'm Voldemort, what?
Yeah, Cole, you're Voldemort. No, we're just Hans had written the illness 19 with instead of an O, a star in there. It sounds like it's like Voldemort saying
Just,
anyways.
That was the first thing I heard when I popped in.
Yeah. Cool. How's everyone doing? Wonderful. Yeah. Aside from being sick, which is kind of a bummer, or a big bummer. But aside from that, all going well. Yeah.
Yeah, we seem to be on track. So.
Yeah. Nice. I really like, I mean, I had seen some of the stuff that y'all are doing in office hours. Which I'm really excited to see updates on, and had seen some activity in Slack that looking pretty cool. So I guess once Zenzi's back, we can get going on the demos. Yeah, but any questions or anything so far about the styling tasks?
Not yet. So far, we've been able to push through. So
yeah. And what's when you think of CSS and styling, like what's the immediate emotion that comes? Is it like fear and dread, or is it like fun and excitement?
For me, it's mostly fun and excitement. Like I know that I'm probably gonna have issues to figure out. Like, but so far it's been in like no pressure, like low pressure situations. So like, I don't mind working with it.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know how everyone else feels, but
yeah, it's fun until you hit a problem that you can't solve, and it takes you 5 hours to center something.
Yeah.
Oh, Han said she's excited.
Yeah. Do you know who Dan Abramov is?
Mm-hmm.
we at the Collab Lab, a few of us got to interview him, like in a mock interview kind of thing. And he went on kind of this interview tour ahead of, like that we were part of. So he went to a few different like YouTube personalities and groups and stuff, and was like, "Give me mock interviews." And two of them had center this div was like the mock interview question. It's a surprisingly difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like every time I do it, something else, like something's different.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Should we jump into demos?
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess we'll go first.
The host has disabled participant screen sharing.
I wish you could just make that a permanent setting.
And Zenzi, you're muted, by the way. But I saw a thumbs up, so I think you're okay.
Is mine up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Look at that color.
So ours was basically to style the add an item form with some buttons that that would let you gain focus through the keyboard and still kind of be like button style. So to do that, we created a div that we put around the field set, and we gave it some styles where we basically, and we got this off something that Jess had found, an article. And basically we take away the style of the actual radio buttons. We create buttons that and style the label. So the label's now all of a sudden what you're selecting, not the radio button per se. And then the hover effect, which is, so if you hover over it, it'll turn green. And we can show you the focus. Once you're inside the I forgot what those called.
Field set.
Once you're inside the field set, then you switch to the arrows. So this is navigating through the keyboard. And then the focus is done right there. And then checked is kind of, those are kind of seem like they're one and the same. But yeah, you have anything else, Jess, that you think I missed?
Maybe if you try clicking one so they can see like it's
Are you talking about just?
Yeah, just so they can see that like.
Oh, adding
that
an
it
item.
works. Oh, what you did was fine, but yeah, I guess making sure it still works is always a good thing.
So there it is.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So one question: if the focus of the input is, or the focus is on the input itself, the button still has the color, right?
Yes.
So that yeah, I guess maybe we would want to. That seems to indicate two different things to me.
Yeah, so I think the focus, it's hard to see.
Oh, they're
like,
not buttons, they're radios, right?
Yeah, the radios, and then the labels are kind of like with style on top that you can see. Yeah, and then I think there's like supposed to be like a dash line around it, which I think is it's just really skinny, so we can't really see it. But we can always change the selected versus like the hover, because like the hover is just kind of like that glow. But then selected it's like that permanent green square, if that makes sense.
I guess the thing that just confused me is that those look like buttons, and they are buttons, but their functionality is actually a radio, right?
The radio is still there.
Mm.
Yeah. The radio is still there. It's just we set the opacity and the width to 0 so that you couldn't see them anymore. But you're still selecting the radio buttons. It's just the buttons and the radio buttons and the label.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I guess it's not any buttons. It's just the labels and the radio circles.
Cool.
Yeah. And then I was just going to talk about the issue that we had that I posted about in Slack. Well, I guess I could screen share. Yeah. Okay. Can you see it okay?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay. So the issue we came across was we were doing the CSS from the article we had. Hold on. And we were going through like one at a time, and they were all working up until the last two, which were the focused and the checked properties, and the label. For some reason, those two things wouldn't work, but the other ones were working. So we couldn't figure it out. And then I remembered back to, luckily I had coded this in the beginning. And I remembered that the input was inside of the label. And so since it was inside of the label, the CSS couldn't separate them because they were basically the same thing. So then once I pulled it out and added the HTML4 label, it worked. So that was something that tripped me up. I think when I first did this, I went off of like a tutorial thing that had it inside. So I guess it worked. It worked. I mean, it worked, but for CSS, it didn't work so well. So that was the big issue that we had. But yeah, we stepped away from it a little bit, and then I remembered back to then, and then we got it fixed. So
nice. Yeah, I remember, when we first saw this, the explanations, I think in the ticket it said to use HTML4, and then we were like, oh, okay, well, there's this alternate where you can put the label around the thing and then it doesn't need it. And so it's kind of cool that saw a reason maybe, yeah, that made it tough, and great job figuring out the reason and solution. Yeah.
So it wasn't the CSS stuff.
Darn semantic HTML.
Yeah. I was like, well, it's probably either something in React we don't know, or maybe something in CSS. Because the tutorial we found was like from 2016, but I mean, it had been working up to that point, and it was using CSS properties that were still listed. So we were confused, and then I just happened to go back and actually look at the HTML and the example, and I realized that, oh yeah, they're separate. So maybe you should pull those out. Yeah.
Cool.
So I have some questions about your general workflow. So I have been following along in Slack, which has been great because you've really outlined what's been going on this week. Thank you for that. But I haven't looked at any of your materials because I wanted to make sure that you had the freedom to do whatever you were going to do, and I wasn't adding my 2 cents. Can you just talk to me about how you decided which design tools to use and how you decided to control your task management and workflow for the week? And anyone can answer, even in a chat if they care to.
I don't know if Steph wants to talk about the Mira board, like how we started. If not, I can, but it was her idea.
Oh yeah, so the Mira board. because we were like, if we split up, it's going to be hard to know like what everybody's thinking and like visually, because it's styling like what everybody wants it to look like in the end.
Mhm.
So we kind of put it all in like one place. So this top wireframe is like regular website. The bottom is mobile first. The Hans drew these, and then Jess and Clay added these ones. And then we have all the styling resources here. And then we just made like a little Kanban, but we didn't really fill it out too much. But yeah, that was kind of like how we could get everybody to see like the same thing and like envision the same thing together.
Have any of you worked with Miro before?
Yes.
This is my first time.
Yeah, so here's the About Us page.
Oh, nice.
And the links are working. We'll go to Jess's stuff because it's first. So yeah, kind of like all the groupthink that was on the Miro board.
Wonderful, thank you. Actually, I do have a follow-up. So now that I'm seeing that your task kind of Kanban board is kind of light, how were you communicating tasks outside of meetings and taking on tasks that were kind of implied by the Miro?
When we met, we decided, and mostly in office hours too, like who would take what. So like we had like those basic wireframes of like how things were arranged. And so we're basically saying like each pair will do, there's 4 of them, so each pair would do 2. And then we're also splitting up like the nav bar and a modal with the explanation for the colors. And then next week we're going to plan to mob program to start working on like the actual like colors and fonts and to get started together to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page. And then if we have more things, we can break that up in between the 2 pairs too.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to hear about this like ensemble programming that's gonna happen.
And in terms of the tools that y'all are using, have you decided on just doing raw CSS or something else? And then how did you come to that decision?
As far as I know, we're doing raw CSS except for the modal. There's like a React modal package that we're going to try to use for that, because everything we read says making a accessible modal is really hard. So, but for like the basic styling, we're going to do raw CSS.
And then the modal is that for the alerts, or what is the modal?
It's for, there's going to be like a question mark on each tab, like each page, and you hit it and it'll say like, it'll explain like the color scheme for the different items in the list. So like not soon, that sort of thing. So that it's kind of like a key, so people will know what things mean.
And so that sounds like that's something that's outside of the base requirements, right? Mm-hmm. And so how are you prioritizing that in relation to everything else to make sure that you get the main thing done?
Well, we're doing the 4 views first, and then the nav bar will definitely be in there. And then we'll see about the modal. Because we could also just have it on like the list page if it works out that way. So it's kind of like the last on list.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of times teams will have like nice to haves kind of things, which are things that you're like not promising anyone that you're getting. Like a lot of the times in an organization, you'll have a product manager who's out there saying, hey, we're going to get all these things done. And if you're saying like, this is definitely going to get done, and then it doesn't, then that's a lot worse than, hey, it would be really cool if we get this done, but we probably won't. And then you get it done. Cool. Awesome. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? We feeling confident? Not confident? What's our how are we feeling about the rest of the process?
I feel good about it. I think no matter what, it's gonna look nice. I mean, we might not get everything in there that we want, but I think we'll have a good product at the end.
Sweet.
I
Awesome.
see Hans saying that she feels good about it.
Nice. And dancing. Hans is sick and dancing.
Yep.
Cool. All right, should I jump into accessibility talk?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. All right. Okay, so today we're going to be chatting a little bit about accessibility. And let's see. Can you all see the screen? Yeah, okay. Let me get everyone's face over here so I can be watching expressions and seeing when I lose everyone's interest. Okay, so today we're talking about kind of the what, whys, and hows of accessibility. So accessibility is oftentimes called A11Y. And so those are kind of interchangeable. So from Wikipedia, we see that web accessibility is an inclusive practice of ensuring that there are no barriers to prevent interaction with or access to websites on the World Wide Web, which we all call it the World Wide Web today. People with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, and socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed. Sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited. All users have equal access to information and functionality. And there's an organization, W3C, that maintains a working group dedicated to web accessibility, and they have a set of standards. And so they're, it's ultimately accessibility is an inclusive practice that is equitable, and that aims to be equitable, and there are specific standards around what is and is not accessible. Typically people with disabilities may use assistive technologies, and these could be like screen readers, screen magnifiers, speech input, assistive keyboards, braille displays, and there are some popular screen readers that are there, some that are built in. If you haven't played around with one, I'd recommend doing so. And at the end in this presentation, which I'll share, there are also some resources, and there's a really, really great video of someone showing how they use a screen reader. And for me, a lot of things were surprising, such as the speed that people have the screen reader at, and generally how it works. So I'd really recommend watching that video if you can. So why do we worry about accessibility? All too often at organizations, accessibility is kind of like thought of like a nice to have, like we were just discussing. But it really should be something that is the base of like what a definition of done should be for a given product. Like it's extremely important. And first reason is obviously because it is the right thing to do. We should be striving to create a community and World Wide Web that has equitable access and information to all people. Second one, and this one, oftentimes if you're trying to make a business case for why should we devote resources to accessibility, there are legal obligations for it. And there have been several cases of large companies that have been found liable under the American Disabilities Act and have had to pay like extremely large fines. So a big high profile case was Domino's, was found liable for essentially not having a site in which everybody could use, and they had to pay some pretty big fines. And I know of another, like a startup that ended up having to close their doors. That was this startup in New York where they were trying to have like essentially it was like a Chipotle where you don't have to interact with people at all. And so you could just not Chipotle, but a restaurant, like fast food kind of thing, where you didn't have to interact with people. And they ended up getting sued because their technology was not accessible, and they ultimately had to close their doors. So it can be an extremely important thing from a business standpoint due to the liability issues. It also broadens your base. There, estimates of 20% of website visitors have some sort of disability. So when you're making your site accessible, you're making your site essentially something that those 20% of users are able to use. So again, a really great business case there. And there's also oftentimes things that are accessible make your products better for everyone. So for example, I used to work on accounting software at a prior company. And when people who were using this kind of accounting software used it, they don't like to use the mouse at all. So we would be constantly thinking about, okay, what does this look like for our users who like to tab through everything and don't want to ever touch the mouse? And the nice thing was that also made our product more accessible. There are lots of examples of things where the accessibility standards also align with what makes a good product. So yeah, I really, really love this this illustration. And so for accessibility, we oftentimes think of these different personas. And I think that oftentimes when we're thinking about accessibility, we're thinking about this left side with the permanent, where we're thinking about someone who may be blind or deaf permanently, and how are they able to access the web. But there's also situations where it's temporary, where you may have a broken arm and you can only use one arm, or you may have just undergone surgery and you're temporarily blind. And then even beyond this, things that we find ourselves in every single day are these situational disabilities, where let's say that you're a new parent and you're trying to hold your baby while navigating something, or and this one's kind of weird, the distracted driver, but because you probably shouldn't be texting while you're driving, but people do that. And so like, what is that like where you're not actually seeing it? So there are oftentimes, this is a great illustration of how many times thinking about accessibility actually makes the product better for things that we actually, whether or not you're permanently disabled or not, the vast majority of the population experiences all the time. So it's really does go a long way to actually making the product a better product. So how do we build things accessible? The number one thing, and if you're ever asked about accessibility in an interview or just in general life, as a developer, the number one thing is semantic HTML. And by this, we mean using the right HTML in the right place. So, each page should have one H1 header, and you should be using buttons for buttons. You should be using links for links, or A tags for links, and just making sure that there is the right semantic HTML there. And most of the time, if you have good semantic HTML, you shouldn't need a lot of the other things. So this quote up here, the best ARIA is no ARIA at all. We need to use semantic HTML whenever possible. And so if you've got good semantic HTML, you're oftentimes not going to need things like ARIA labels. So that's number one. Two, always including alt tags on alt attributes on your image tags, because image is semantic, but they just the very nature of the image itself is not accessible unless you have an alt tag on there. And then when you need to, using ARIA attributes, and then using ensuring that all content is reachable via the keyboard. And in a second, in a little demo, we'll discuss that. And making sure that the content, the tab ordering actually makes sense, because sometimes it could be reachable by a keyboard, but may jump over in weird spots, which we'll see in a second in the demo. Sufficient color contrast is very important, and not using just color to signify state. So for example, in our application, we are using color quite a bit in terms of showing, like, is this item ready to be purchased soon? Or I just saw in the demo that we're using color in order to show which of the radios is checked, but making sure that that's not the only thing that's signifying the state. So having a label maybe that shows what that color means, or some sort of an ARIA attribute to fall back on when using a screen reader, because not everyone can see color. Cool. So there are really good automated tools out there. Axe is a good one, but automated tools are never perfect, and there have been some studies done showing that they really only find like around 30% of the issues. So just relying on automated tools on its own is not a surefire way to make sure that you're going to have an accessible site. There are some guided audits that are built into accessible insights, and you can also have audits done by accessibility testers. And so there are companies that kind of specialize in that. So demo time. Cool. All right. So we're going to be using real quick this accessibility insights for web extension, which is really cool. And I'd recommend taking a look at it, downloading it, or like putting it on your in your browser so that you can play around with it. And we've got we've got a site here that's that we're gonna look at the tab order on, right? So with this thing, it's got this little fast pass, which outlines how, for given sites, like what are how is it doing accessibility wise. And so we can see there's a couple of issues here. The one that we're gonna go through is the tabs. So this tab stops is a really nice visualizer of how the site is doing when you try to move around with just the keyboard. So flip that on, and then we can see here, first stop is up here, and then it moves over, and then here, do. So it's a nice little visualizer of where we're going. And what do we think about this movement right now? Is this good?
It makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, it's pretty solid. We're going, generally you want to go from the top left to the bottom right. And so that's more or less how it should be. So now, shoot, I can refresh real quick. So now let's try the same thing on this one. I think this is the right one. We'll go over here, the tab stops, turn it on. Okay, so I think it's saying we should be starting up here in the add a trip, but it's going straight down to this input, right? So it's kind of odd that that's the first place that you land. Then it goes over here, it goes through here, then, then it goes all the way up here. There was a few tabs to get there. Right, and so this is an example of very odd tab behavior, right? And so we can see it ends up as this crazy web of things. And so this is what we would prefer our sites not to look like. But this little visualizer is a nice thing that you can try out on our application when we're building it, and just see kind of how you're doing. Yeah, and there's another tool that I like to use sometimes that is this wave one. It's a little, the W over here. It's kind of crazy when I have both of them on there. So this one goes through and kind of outlines where we're at, what are some issues, and then it'll kind of, show you more details on them. But there is, this article right here at the end, if you take a look at it later, it goes through like an example of some developers who created the worst site ever that they could from an accessibility standpoint, and then tried to see how some automated tools did against them. And they're not always perfect. So again, the automated tools are not 100% going to catch everything. But as a developer, I think we should try to use them, and then also make sure that we are very, very educated about semantic HTML and just like what it means to make an accessible site. Yeah, so that is all that I have. Questions, comments?
That's a lot of cool stuff.
I mean, oh yeah, you go.
I had a quick question. When I tab like through our website, it'll like jump down to the nav bar, which is at the bottom, and that's okay, right? Even though it does that and then jumps back up to like the content. Because remember the links are at the bottom for ours. So I didn't know if it was like an importance thing of like, oh, let me give them the options of the, the tabs first and then go to what's on the page.
Yeah, I mean, it should, I don't think you should have it jump straight to the bottom.
I think it did. It might have done the title first. I would have to check again. I just remember that it did like the nav bar at the bottom before it went to like the content.
Mm.
That
Yeah,
kind
maybe we
of-
can. Huh?
No, I was thinking, no, like I'm thinking about it, and yeah, normally that would be crazy if it was like a footer down there, but the nav bar is, if you're opening onto a site, you might not necessarily want to do anything on the main page. You may want to get to that nav bar quickly and navigate to whatever section you really want to. So it wouldn't surprise me if just Semantic HTML kind of created that priority.
That's what I was
Assuming
wondering.
that your nav bar is going to be
Okay.
at the top.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would make sense. And if it's doing it just because it's in a nav,
Yeah. Yeah.
then that's probably kind of Semantic HTML saying, "Hey, here's the way to do it." Which,
Okay.
Our,
Just
our
making
nav
sure.
links are actually at the top of the hierarchy. We just styled it to push it to the bottom.
Oh, that's
Oh.
true. I forgot about that.
One thing I noticed, I've been playing around with it, is we might want to move the log out button into the nav links.
Yeah, I think the wireframe that we have now is like the nav bar is at the top and then the log out button is in there. I
Yeah.
think
so
that-
what you could do is test out if you took out the styling and then move the nav to the bottom, and see what happens to Semantic HTML, because that may be an indicator that your CSS is actually getting in the way of having it accessible.
makes sense. I'll play around with it. I mean, we are
Hmm.
moving it. I just was wondering.
No, and those are completely like the kinds of questions that you should be asking all the time. And sometimes there's really kind of surprising behavior for how keyboard navigation works. So like I remember being really surprised with checkboxes. Like, do you know how you check a checkbox? Is
it the space?
spacebar. Yeah. And I remember
Oh.
being like, wait, why can't I enter? I need to enter. And I know like sometimes they're just surprising behavior.
Yeah.
And I once had a product manager who wanted to like override that. And we're like, no, probably shouldn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened with us with the field set because we were trying to like tab through and it would like stop on the first item of like the radio buttons and then it would go to like the button. And it took us a while to figure it out that you'd have to use the arrow keys to go through all the arrow to the radio buttons. So we thought that like we broke it when we really didn't. But like we also assumed that like a screen reader would know how to handle all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of the time, if you're using Semantic HTML and you're using it how it's like, yeah, you're doing good
Intended.
Semantic HTML, it'll just end up doing those things. And the nice thing about it is that some of these things that you had no idea of, which are actually within the standards, will end up getting complied with just because you use the HTML well.
Yeah, because I never used a field set before, so now I know what it does. So that's pretty cool.
Nice. Cool. Well, we don't really have another issue, right? We just have this one big issue. Any questions or comments around that? Do we want to, call this one early and give everyone some time back, or do you have any things that you want to focus on?
I'm okay. I don't know about everyone else. Oh, I'm just got the sunglasses on.
Cool. Nice. And one thing I just want to comment on, what I love towards the end of Collab Lab sessions, more or less, when I can see that everyone is that the team is very self-sufficient, and there's oftentimes a feeling where I feel bad about myself as a mentor because I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, that's good. So I like that I'm feeling bad at times, like feeling that I shouldn't, that I should be doing more. But that's just because y'all are crushing it and doing, able to self-organize. So great job.
And you guys are amazing. I mean, whenever we need anything, I mean, you guys have helped us out. So don't get those feelings.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess we can call it a wrap. Are you good with that, Senzi? Yeah.
Yes, I am. And thanks, Steph.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I will see y'all online. I'm really looking forward to seeing how things shape up. And if you need anything, just don't hesitate to reach out.
Sounds
Cool.
good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
See y'all.
y'all.
Bye.
Bye.